It's September. It feels like November around here this week, but it is September. Hello, Evan Bland here with Sam McKewon and Tom Shatel, the Pick Six podcast with the Omaha World-Herald, and it's one of those weeks, guys, where it feels like we just we kind of get down to business a little bit. Not a lot of pomp and circumstance. Everybody knows what's going on. Do you guys have your game faces on?
We do. It's Colorado week, right? Nebraska, Colorado for the last time in however many years. So, yeah. Before we get to that, I do want to mention the volleyball match from last night. So we're recording this on a Wednesday. Nebraska played SMU, the number 2 Nebraska volleyball team, the really good team in the fall sports of Nebraska athletics. And they got swept. They lost to an unranked team for the first time in 7 years.
It felt like a typo when you saw that play out.
I watched it. It wasn't a typo. They just got their butt kicked, and I thought we're not going to go undefeated this year. They're going to get everybody's best shot, but maybe you can go down there and there's everybody's fired up and losing 5. But you can't get swept. So there's some issues there, early season issues. So there's another match coming up. I'm sure they'll work through it, but that one's going to be that's going to be a stain on the resume this year.
It is. They've already lost to Hawaii, SMU has. So they're not like a juggernaut. John Cook, part of it is we think we're Nebraska, and we're going to roll out here and smoke teams. He's sort of indicting we're just going to show up and win, which most of the time they do.
I don't think it's not the worst thing in the world if you respond well to it. I mean, they didn't lose a game last year till late in the season. That championship match to Texas.
It's not bad, but if you're going to be a number 1 seed and be home, it's hard. That one hurts. So, but they're in the top conference. They got plenty of time to make it up. But Penn State beat Louisville last night. Minnesota's already beaten Texas. It's going to be a tough road, but they already knew that.
How high's the worry meter? Like how seriously?
Well, I don't like Cook having to yell at it, be angry and call out his team, which is a veteran team. You don't want to call out a veteran team this early. They should know that there's going to be challenges, and they're going to have to raise their level. And they're going to have off nights, but it's not there's plenty of volleyball left, but that one hurts.
Yeah, I think that the last time they lost to an unranked team, they won the national championship. They went 32-4, but they did not get to play the super regional at home. They did have to go on the road, and they beat Kentucky a couple of years ago. Nebraska lost a bunch of matches. They had to go on the road to beat Texas. They did it. So, it really matters what you do at the end of the season. So, yeah, I think Nebraska can certainly rebound. The offense doesn't look right. I don't know why, because they have so many players returning from last year, but it doesn't look quite in sync. And the serving was an issue last year. So if that becomes an issue again, I don't think that's going to be all that surprising. But the offense doesn't look as potent as it did last year. They play Creighton and Arizona State next week. Now they're gonna roll the teams they play this week. They will actually be able to roll out there and smoke the Citadel and Montana State. But next week they play Creighton, and I think Creighton's probably a better team than SMU. And Arizona State comes in for a little mini tournament at the end of the week, and Arizona State's pretty darn good. That is a top 15 team. So Nebraska is not going to have a lot of time to sort of get its act together, because they have 2 teams coming into Devaney next week that can beat them. And if they lost those 2 matches, then I think you're talking about you're pretty much going on the road for the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Anytime you do that, you're risking not making the Final Four, and that's the annual goal.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. Because they've been just psychologically what they've been hearing about themselves for the last year and how great they are, and then the ESPN documentary and everything else. How they come back from that will be interesting. Of course, the other major event this weekend, Colorado. I want to start with this, you guys. So everyone talks about the intensity of this game. Last week we talked about the crowd and how high the venom's going to be for that thing. Do you think winning this game or losing this game would have more of an impact on Nebraska's season?
Winning. If they lose, everybody will probably panic and say it's over and all this stuff and everything sucks and all that. This is year 2 of a long-term project. And I don't even want to talk about it because about them losing because it's Wednesday. But you asked the question.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Winning will. This program needs a signature, big-time win, especially at home, emotional win, sort of a prove-it game. That would, I think, benefit them more and set them forward on a path going upward more than I think if you lose, the coaches will know how to calm that down with the team and learn from it. And again, in my mind, this is a 6-6 or 7-5 year. This isn't 8 or 9. I mean, I don't know where people are getting that. I think this is year 2. Every time Rule has had year 2, it's been 6-6 or right around there. I just think it's if it gets better than that, perfect. But I don't think there's plenty of games left if they lose. So I don't think that is the end of the world. A lot of this is how do they look? I mean, how do they win or lose? So I think they're going to win, but I think it will benefit them a lot more.
I think it affects them more if they win, just like Tom said. I think part of it's recruiting. So they have all these incredible recruits coming in, and we can talk a little bit about that. Some of the players they have coming in, including guys that are, again, committed elsewhere, which I kind of thought that might happen. It would shock me if David Sanders came to town, but Dawson Merritt's here, and he's committed to Alabama. So I think the recruiting aspect would be a really big deal. Nebraska would be able to get some momentum there, not only for the 26 guys, but for Merritt and Michael Terry, who's visiting.
Cortez Mills,
who's a smaller receiver, kind of like Ja'Cory Barney, and then Michael Terry is a larger receiver, kind of like the guys they have now. I think if you get that second win, then you can kind of look at getting on a roll. You have 2 more home games after. Actually, yeah, you have 2 more home games. Then you go to Purdue. Then you play Rutgers. You just get on a roll. And I think there's a this is one of those moments where it's like you got to take advantage of what's in front of you. If they lose, it is entirely possible that they would go into a spiral, but it's also entirely possible they win their next 5 or 4. Yeah, 5. So, like, they would play Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. If Nebraska loses 35-31 to Colorado, which is possible, I don't think that means they can't win those next 5. I mean, they can. Each game, each week is where it's at. But if they win that game against Colorado, that's the validation that they had in 2016. Remember when they beat Oregon? Oregon was not a great team that year, but it felt like, okay, now we're going to go on a run, and they did. And they won 9 games, and they started 7-0. This would feel like something very similar, very similar.
I guess my counter to that is I just keep thinking back to the 2019 game and how that was also a program in its second year at the time.
Yes.
For Nebraska and Scott Frost. And they had the big lead, the 17-0 lead, and they lost it, and they lost in overtime, and it just never felt like they recovered from that. And that wasn't a great Colorado team either.
No, they were 5-7.
And I just,
coach got fired.
I just keep thinking back to like how much.
No, he didn't. It was Mel Tucker's first year. Never mind.
How much emotional weight they put on that game. And being on the field after, and the players were pissed, and Adrian Martinez, swears in a post-game press conference. That might have been the only time he ever did that. And so, this it's a moment in year 2 where
right.
Year 1 you cast the vision, year 2 you got to start seeing it on the field. And so I think the culture is better. Maybe the state of mind is better than that 2019 team had. But I just keep thinking back to those early key matchups in the second year, how important they really are.
And I don't disagree with that. I think what I would say is that if you told me that Nebraska was going to Ohio State on September 28th, I would feel it a little bit more, because part of what happened that season is Nebraska loses that game, they start 3-1, game day comes to town, and then the ass kicking Ohio State team came to town, and that was bad. I mean, it was 48-7. That was Ryan Day's best team probably, with Justin Fields and everybody on the field and Chase Young, and they humiliated Nebraska, and Nebraska was not the same. I feel like that game is not there, and so I think Nebraska has a better culture. Let's be honest. I'm not trying to knock Scott Frost. Good luck to him with the Rams, but the culture that he built, and we saw it up close, Evan, that year. Those guys were not happy with each other. They weren't on the same page. And just to hear Mekhi Bayer, yesterday say the things that he said about a guy he's known for 7 months in Dylan Raiola, just tells me that the culture inside Matt Rule's program is better and maybe a little bit more capable of handling loss. And to be clear, I think if Nebraska loses on Saturday, I don't think it's going to be because, they found a way to blow it. It's going to be because they're playing an elite quarterback and a really good receiving core, and that group of guys can make plays irrespective of whether Colorado runs the ball or not.
If ever a team was going to go in the tank, it was last year. We start 0-2, new coach that nobody knows, a bunch of players from a fragile era of Frost. I mean, if anybody was going to go in the tank, it was last year, and they didn't. They fought back. They showed that they could take a punch, and they got as far, they got as much out of that team as they could. But so I think they'll be fine.
Where does Colorado, if you guys were making a list of the most valuable wins Nebraska could pick up on its schedule this year, where does Colorado fall? Probably behind Ohio State, maybe Wisconsin. Where do you put Colorado sort of in that hierarchy?
Oh boy! Well, USC is way up there because again, it's USC, and the game would be in LA, where you are probably going to recruit at some point. That'll be a national game, and again, it's USC. Again, that would be Ohio State. Same. That put those two at the top. I just think Wisconsin at this point. It's just a program statement. It's just you're not going to play them every year, but you just need to beat them. It's at the end of the year. Yeah, it's again. Colorado's important because of the timing. It's really perfectly placed on the schedule. You got 4 home games to start the season. You've got 1-0. You finally started 1-0 for the first time in 5 years. Now this is placed at a point where it can be a catapult. It can really, if the crowd is what we think it is, if the emotions are what we think they're going to be, and they win that game, we haven't experienced that. I mean, I remember Oregon. Colorado's much more important than Oregon ever will be to Nebraska, because people still remember. And this thing would be something we haven't seen in a long time, and it would. I really think it would, as far as confidence and swagger, it would change the season, at least the first half. But if you're asking me to rank and say at the end of the year who would you rather beat, I mean, you got to go USC, Ohio State at the top.
What do you think, Sam?
I think it would be a really big deal. Yeah, very high on the list. One of the challenges with that question is that in our minds we think about the best teams that Nebraska plays, and in some ways the games that Nebraska most has to win are against the teams that it can't afford to lose to.
Right.
And so one of the things that's happened over the last several years is Nebraska has lost a lot to Purdue. Not last year, they have. They've lost to Illinois. Not last year, but they have. losing those teams would not be good. Losing to Indiana would not be good. I know that Nebraska fans at this point have no room, and the team certainly has no room to be arrogant. But the games that you expect to win, when you lose them, even in your mind, well, we just lost to Indiana in football. Imagine what Indiana's thinking when they lose by 30 to Nebraska at the Big Ten basketball tournament. And Mike Woodson's walking out, and he's pissed off. An Indiana fan, like at that moment, is if we can't beat Nebraska, what are we doing? That's kind of the same feeling. But that feeling is true for Colorado, too, because Colorado's not a very good football program. Deion Sanders has done an incredible job of generating interest in his program, but his team is not viewed as very good. And Nebraska has lost 3 straight to mediocre to bad Colorado teams. 5-7, 5-7, 4-8. They haven't lost to good Colorado teams. They've lost to bad ones. And so I think this game is right at the top of the list, because if you beat Colorado, then you can say you did that. And if you don't beat Ohio State, I think people are like, well, no. I would agree with Tom. I think USC is a more monumental thing than Ohio State, because you're beating them in LA and you've never won at USC. I don't think they've ever won Ohio State either, but we went and beat USC. We got LA, That would be a big deal. I think they're going to beat Ohio State in the horseshoe with a fluke. They're going to catch Ohio State on a day when Ohio State's not playing well, and hey, look at that, they won. It's not going to be one of those. So I'd say Colorado's right at the top of the list for me. It's important. Fans want it. They're going to be really, really loud and angry before the game, and they're going to want this thing. And so I think it's very, very high.
The recruiting piece, as we mentioned a little bit, is really important too. I mean, they have a massive visitor list. We mentioned some of the names. I'd put Christian Jones, the Omaha West Side linebacker, on that list too.
Yes.
And he's essentially waiting to see if Nebraska is what people think it's going to be. Like, this is the game where you see that. And as you mentioned too, the 26 class, guys like Jackson Cantwell, 5-star offensive lineman, is going to be in town. Michael Clayton, 4-star quarterback thereafter. So these are guys who've been on the visits, who've seen the facilities, and now you got to see what's a game day like at night at Memorial Stadium. Have them see the light show. Have them see the fans. Have them feel the goosebumps, on a key sack or key defensive play. Like, this is one of those games where I think a lot of recruits come, quite honestly, just because it's a big event and they can come and get into the game for free. Like, that's not uncommon to have that happen, but you can change some minds. You can plant a seed in those minds. Signing day is months away. Of course, in the portal era, any impression you make now could be relevant 2 or 3 years from now too. So I don't think you can undersell the momentum they have there. The work that Nebraska's done in acquiring talent has been really good. They have Dylan Raiola. But think how good it could be if they actually take off and see some of these results on the field.
No question. And the players that they have coming, it's still hard for me to envision exactly what they'd have Michael Terry do, even though he's a 5-star player. I think he can play a lot of different positions. But Cortez Mills is a 6-foot, 170-pound receiver who I think is dynamic. The quarterbacks that are coming in, it's hard to know exactly what Dayton Raiola is going to be, because I think he still needs to get a little taller. I don't think he's hit his full growth spurt yet, because when you watch him stand next to Dylan, Dayton's about 6 foot, 6.5 feet, and Dylan's 6'3", and he's 235 or whatever he is, 225, and so we don't know exactly what Dayton's going to be. The other 2 guys coming in are pretty good. Apparently there's a 4th as of this morning, but I don't know who that 4th guy is. And then of course you have the offensive lineman coming in, and so they'll be on that tight sideline over there now, because they've switched the recruiting sidelines over to the west, so they'll be on the tight sideline, and they'll get to watch the game. Now, what you don't want to have happen was what happened when Miami played Florida. I don't know if you saw this on TikTok or wherever. After the game, the Miami players are walking by the guys that are in for Florida's recruiting weekend and shaking their hands and going, "Come to Miami." And they all kind of knew them, right? Because Miami and Florida are all kind of recruiting the same guys. I don't know that Nebraska and Colorado are recruiting exactly the same guys, but I don't think Colorado would mind if Cortez Mills went to Colorado, that kind of thing. And so what you don't want to do is have a poor showing. You want to show off for those guys and play spectacular football. And if Nebraska is able to do that, I think they're going to flip. I don't think Dawson Merritt's in town because he's not really interested in Nebraska. Why else would he be here, right? I mean, he was here like 3 times.
You come to see an event.
Yeah, but he's
guys
committed
do
to
that.
Alabama.
Sure.
Like his dad's Chiefs. His dad is a defensive backs coach. They're kicking off on Thursday night. He doesn't have to come to Nebraska, but I suspect his dad may be there. Like, it's just going to be an interesting dynamic. And to me, Merritt's one of the best players. I think he's probably the top player that Nebraska's recruiting, and Christian Jones is right there next to him. And both of them are elite players. They need a little bit better play at linebacker. Not that Bayer and Bullock didn't play well, but there's just 2 of those guys. And Nebraska needs about 5 or 6. Their depth at that position is just so. And I think they could really use those 2 guys.
We don't need to linger too much on UTEP last week, but what was maybe a takeaway or 2 that you guys had from that game that can carry over into the Colorado game? I mean, obviously, if Dylan Rella continues to perform like he did, that's a heck of a start. But what's something that Nebraska showed you maybe in that opener that's going to be key here this weekend?
Everything. Just basically they got to play the same way, but I think the offensive line and run game and the receivers playmaking, just the way they scored was just different. It was like, oh, that's what other teams usually do to Nebraska.
Right.
And so that's different, and that's what it's going to take to get to a bowl game this year. You've got to be different. You've got to have that element. And they flashed it. Now, what are we going to see that we didn't see last week? Because they were holding things back. So, what's that going to be this week? Is it going to involve Harburg? Is it going to involve somebody else? Somebody made the comment to me. Well, I thought I thought Fedoni would have caught more. I said, well, I think they were probably trying to get the receivers involved early in the season, but Rail is gonna. It's just a matter of who's going to be open and what he sees a lot of times too, and what what's open and what's not open. So, that's just going to be kind of like a developing thing every week. So, yeah, playmaking and offensive line.
Play from the receivers. I mean, it was really good. Isaiah Nayor was basically uncoverable. They couldn't cover him. At least not with the one guy. They couldn't cover him. And he was open a lot. And I think he got 8 targets. I can't remember. He caught 6. One of the passes, he was in traffic, and he was covered by 3 guys because they were trying to go on a double move with Jalen Lloyd on a weird route that for whatever reason, they wanted Lloyd to run the whole route. He was wide open in the middle of the field, and then he ran himself into coverage. But Banks was good. Carter Nelson, the glimpse that we saw, I don't know how you cover that guy. On like over routes, so if you're thinking of him in the slot and you're kind of coming on over routes and stuff like that, how do you cover that? Linebacker cannot cover him. And maybe a safety can, but if you throw that ball where only 6'5" Carter Nelson can catch it. So, I mean, we're watching the game. Like, that's a different guy at 6'5", 230. I mean, he's making moves that a 6'1", 200-pound guy makes. Those feet and the moves and the speed.
Who can high jump 7 feet.
That's a really good football player. And I think it was hard for me to tell what he was exactly going to be until he gets out on the field. But then those couple of moves he made, I'm like, this guy's going to catch 20, 25 passes this year, and he's going to do some damage.
Is he a different version, a bigger version of Wan'Dale Robinson or maybe Luke McCaffrey? Just the kind of role that they were going to play in that offense and maybe didn't materialize all the time.
I think that Wan'Dale Robinson was a great player who was 5'9". Right. And the thing that Carter Nelson, he's probably not quite as fast as Wan'Dale, but he's huge. And, yeah, I think they can do things with Carter that they could never do with Wan'Dale Robinson. Yeah. And Wan'Dale's a great player. I mean, right. He's in the NFL, and I'm not trying to knock him. But,
right, no, I just...
But, you don't need to spread the game out to use Carter Nelson. And in the NFL, when you watch Wan'Dale play, they spread him out and they isolate him and he makes a play. But I think it's going to be he and Banks and Nayor, and we'll see with Jalen Lloyd. And the way they used Janiron Bonner was basically as like a flying tight end. So they used him as a blocker mostly, and then they ran him, I think, once, and they did a nice job with him. And so the play of the receivers, I think, is the thing that's got to be portable. And then on defense, we didn't see much from Nebraska. They kept it pretty vanilla. The challenge that they have with Shedeur Sanders is Shedeur is smart. He really is, and he can figure out a defense. So you can't blitz him every play. He's not going to be a deer in the headlights. He'll just kind of run around. But if you play 3 against him and he can just run around with those long rallies and wait until somebody gets open, you got to kind of pick your poison with him. And you know what? Sometimes both options are poison. And so they're going to have to figure out how to slow him down. And last season, only one team really did, and it was late in the year, and Colorado didn't give a crap. But no one else really slowed them down. And I don't know that Nebraska can slow them down.
I think the crowd can slow him down a little bit if there are, if they have to call timeout because they can't hear, or the linemen are they're not together on the count, or they jump a little bit because of the crowd. That can spoil the rhythm of an offense. If you're on a drive, all of a sudden you get pushed back 5 yards. You got to stop and wait. I mean, they've got to disrupt that offense at some point. But I think the old-fashioned way, run the ball and be physical with Colorado. It keeps the other offense on the sideline, and it just mentally wears down the opponent.
I think the thing about Sanders too that makes it so challenging is, and Nebraska sacked him 7 times last year, and he still threw for almost 400 yards. Right. He's not going to run much. He doesn't want to run, but he's going to be elusive in the pocket, and he is going to buy that time. So, what a challenge this week for Nebraska's secondary, which is probably going to have to defend at times Jimmy Horn and Travis Hunter and the rest for 5, 6, 7 seconds while he's scrambling and moving around in the pocket. So, this is a week, I think, a guy like Tommy Hill, if you put on tape that you can defend these guys, he could make a lot of money in the NFL this week by just hanging with guys, tackling in space. Obviously, the onus is going to be on that defensive line to get home when it can. But I think this is a huge challenge for Nebraska's secondary because, again, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to hold on to these guys for more than 4 or 5 seconds a lot of times.
I think that's true. And, I went back and watched part of the 92 Nebraska-Colorado game. And that's the high watermark for crowds. But one of the reasons I went back and watched it is because there was an NFL quarterback, Coy Detmer, and then 3 NFL receivers, Michael Westbrook, Charles Johnson, and Ray Caruth, an NFL tight end, and Christian Foria, and an NFL running back, and Rashawn Salam. They were all on the same team. And so, they had all the players. They probably had collectively better players than this Colorado team has. But you know what was different? I think Sanders is just – and the evolution of quarterback play is so far ahead of where it was. Yeah. That Coy Detmer was just kind of sitting back there receiving this 7-man blitz that Charlie McBride kept running at him, and he was helpless. That would not be Sanders. They would have answers for that. He would have answers for that. I think he's further along in his development than, say, Cordell Stewart. People remember this. Cordell Stewart and Coy Detmer could not figure out Nebraska from 92, 93, 94, 95, and 96. And Detmer didn't play in 95. He was hurt, but he came back in 96. They never figured out Nebraska's defense. They were completely blindsided by what Nebraska was doing. I just don't think that's the way quarterbacks are anymore. And Nebraska finally has a guy like that who's been training for this, and so he's not going to be thrown off by it either. But one of the challenges is Nebraska can throw everything it has at Sanders, and he's going to hit some plays. Mm-hmm. That's why you got to score. You can't think, okay, this is a game where Nebraska's going to win. Nebraska allowed 7 points in 92. In 93, they allowed 17. In 94, they allowed 7. In 95, it was 24. And then in 96, which was a crazy game in the rain and snow, they allowed 12. That's not happening. Maybe 24. But, that's not going to happen anymore. And so, even if Nebraska's defense is elite, they've got to score points on Saturday. Dylan Raiola has to answer at least 3 times. You're going to have to score at least 24 to win. And I do feel like they have a team that can finally do that. If Dylan wasn't there, I don't know, but they have him. he's there.
So let me ask you this, Sam. Like, I keep thinking about this game in a basketball term, where like if you've got Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter on one side, it's like that's the team that wants to run up tempo and get as many possessions as they can and score. Nebraska has the line advantage, in my opinion, on both sides, and maybe it makes sense to slow it down and shorten the game a little bit. Is this a game where Nebraska, do you think, is going to feel like it needs to slow the game down, or do you find some middle ground there where, yeah, you feel like you can hang with Colorado in something like a shootout? How far does Nebraska want to lean into that, given that maybe Colorado has the best individual players, but Nebraska's the deeper team?
I think they watched what North Dakota State did, which was play keep away for a long time and almost win that game. And I think Nebraska's got a little bit more depth and talent than North Dakota State. I mean, I think Nebraska would beat North Dakota State by 10, let's say, 14. So I think Nebraska can watch that and go, listen, let's wear this team down. Let's not hand him the ball over and over again. You don't want to give Shedeur Sanders 12 possessions in a game. If you do that, he's probably going to score 5. And that's too many. And so you've got to hold on to the ball and maybe play a little bit of keep away and don't feel bad about that. And so that would be what I would do, is slow the tempo down a little bit, run the football. If the deep ball is there, take it. But at the same time, don't feel like that's what you have to do. You don't have to win a track meet. It's not the Big 12. Imagine what Colorado-Oklahoma State's going to be, 52-49. You don't have to do that. You can play your own game. So I think that's probably the direction they'll go in. They're going to try to run the ball. I think they'll be able to run the ball. One thing I'll say about Colorado's defense, watching the North Dakota State game again, they have a couple linebackers who I would not describe as quick, and they are struggling. In that game against North Dakota State, they really struggled to identify who to cover. And so Nebraska can do some things maybe with play action that just leaves guys wide open. Colorado's linebackers didn't do a very good job of covering, but they're athletic and they're quick. And I'll be honest, Ben Hart and Corcoran have been around a long time. Those Colorado guys will try to shoot gaps on those two guys, and they might get there. Corcoran and Ben Hart have to play well, because if they don't, then you're going to see situations where Raiola and some of those backs are in trouble in the backfield, and you do not want to get behind the chains.
Tom, for you, is it as simple as owning the trenches on both sides? Like, is that where this game's won?
Yeah, I think so. And I think on defense, I got to think that they're going to hope that a 4-man rush is going to be enough. Because I'd love to see what John Butler is doing with Tony White this week, and looking at that passing game, the quarterback. Because again, John Butler, as we've said, has seen everything in the NFL, and for the most part, done very well. So, I just wonder. We see this in basketball a lot of times, where not necessarily like a box and one on Travis Hunter, but I wonder if you put 2 people on him, you somehow try to chip him or get him worn out, where he has to run through somebody, and then there's another guy waiting for. I mean, obviously, if you try to take one guy away, they'll find somebody else. But that Shedeur's a comfort. That's a security blanket guy, and on the road with a big crowd, he's going to be looking for that security blanket, I think. So, and plus, Travis Hunter is just the best player on the field, probably. So, I wonder about those things. It's going to come down to execution, but obviously turnovers. But yeah, I think offensive and defensive line are going to be very important, and Sam's right about quarterback play. It is different, but over the years, Colorado's had really good quarterbacks in the 90s and the 2000s, and Nebraska always found a way to sack them.
They did.
Always found a way to get in their face. The one time that they came to Lincoln in '94, and Cordell Stewart was going to run option. I mean, he was a runner, and he had Rashawn Salam, who won the Heisman that year, with him, and Charlie took out Rashawn Salam every play. He said, "We're taking out the running back. The quarterback's going to have to beat us," and he couldn't do it. I mean, he kind of choked in those games, and I don't know if Charlie saw that in him, but he wasn't going to beat him, and it just totally flustered. Now, I'm not saying Shedeur is anywhere. That's a different game, but they always, when they went to the 4-3, a lot of people thought, well, it's to beat Miami and Florida State. It was to beat Colorado, too. And a lot of people didn't want to give Colorado credit back then. But Nebraska had to change recruiting and the way they played defense to stop Colorado. But they did. They went to the 4-3 in the first year. Trev Alberts and Travis Hill were all over them. 92, every play they were back there. So, can they do that here? Well, yeah, you could sack Shedeur. He's sacked a lot. But he gets back up and he keeps, those guys, all he needs is just one breakdown on defense. Somebody to fall asleep or lose an assignment, and it's 7 points. So, you saw that last week. So I just wonder what John Butler and Tony are going to come up with. It'll be really interesting. To me, that's sort of a chess match here.
You know what's great about this rivalry, and we're already talking about it a little bit, is like it spans generations. So like if you want to hate on Colorado for what happened in the 90s or the 80s, you can do that. If you want to hate on Colorado for what happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you can do that. Where do you guys start with your Colorado memories? What are maybe covering the games or some memories that stand out covering those teams over the years?
Well, boy, that's a good one. Sam, why don't you take this one? Let me think about it.
Okay. The first memory I have of Colorado was halfback pass from Mickey Hatcher to somebody in 1986, and they beat Nebraska 20-10, and that was Nebraska's first loss that year. That was probably the loss that kept Nebraska out of the national title. And later in the year, they play Oklahoma, and they blew it. I mean, and Oklahoma got a call late where Keith Jackson pushed off. It's pretty famous stuff. But the first one I remember is listening on the radio. The game wasn't on TV, and listening to I think it was like a flea flicker. And Colorado beat Nebraska. And then I remember J.J. Flanagan's fumble in '88 when they were going to score. They were going to win the game, and he fumbled inexplicably at the 20. And then, you remember all the other ones, 89, 90, 91, the snowball game. I think, there was a feeling about Colorado in the 90s when I was a kid at that time. You really, really didn't like them. Like, you didn't like Oklahoma, but Colorado generated this sort of different feeling, and you kind of respected them. And then when they had when they had Darian Hagan, and he was better than Nebraska's guys, and he was. And then, like, when they got Tommy, then it was almost like an answer. Okay, now Nebraska's got Tommy, and now we got the guy. Like, that's how it felt at the time. It was a lot about the quarterbacks, Tommy versus Cordell, and it was a lot about the two teams. They were actually quite similar, and so Nebraska eventually got the upper hand. That's what I remember.
Well, how much time do we have?
Take it. Take some time.
I've seen different Colorados. The first time I went out there was 1977. I was a sophomore college and working for the student paper at Missouri. We drove. We left at 10 o'clock at night from Columbia and drove all the way to Denver. Got there the next afternoon. Just drove all the way through Kansas in the middle of the night and all that stuff. Mountains. Resort hotels, Boulder, Pearl Street, the mall, all that stuff. Good football, solid football back then. Won some games. Hired Chuck Fairbanks, the coach at OU, in the game of the century, and who would coach in who was in the NFL for a while, and that was a flop. And then they just for a while they changed colors. They couldn't win. Everybody beat the hell out of him, and then they gave McCartney one extra year. Okay, we don't fire him yet. Give him one more year. He was running the thing called not the wishbone, but it was like a flex bone where he threw a little bit with it, and he just hit on the players finally. And then I remember covering was in Kansas City covering the '89 Nebraska game, and Nebraska was hold them off, but Colorado was coming. They lost to Lincoln in '88. Eric Gimney fumbled, and they ended up Nebraska held on to that game. '89, it all came crashing down. But I just remember the rancor, the anger, the bullying from Colorado people toward Nebraskans. And I wasn't working here yet. I remember reading some of the sports columns in Denver. Especially there was one columnist at the Rocky Mountain News who was sort of this, gentle wordsmith. I won't say his name, but he was just kind of revered as this guy who was all class. And he was writing this column about how Nebraskans didn't have indoor plumbing and that they were hillbillies and didn't wear shoes. And this was, you turn on talk radio, that's all you heard. Their cheerleaders are cows. This is this, that. Everything was just ripping the Nebraska culture. It was very personal. It was personal attacks on good people who they were tired of. Everybody in the Big 8 was tired of Nebraska. They all get tired of getting their ass kicked every week. But Colorado did something about it. But it was the way they beat Nebraska. It was personal. The fans did a little extra. They had, instead of like their little plastic cups of beer they sold at Folsom Field, they filled those cups with something else and threw them on Nebraska fans. They did things with their cars. And I'm sure Nebraska fans were no angels. Probably there was some in every crowd. But anyway, that's the thing I remember about this series is how it started, and it escalated so quickly to the fact when I joined the World-Herald in '91, we went out there, and it was this blizzard from Omaha to Denver. And I remember one of the Journal-Star guys had to take a train to the game. I got out there Wednesday, so we kind of beat it. But we were snowed in Boulder. I couldn't leave our hotel. And then the snowballs were flying on, and not just at the last field goal, but they were throwing snowballs the entire game at Nebraska people, so the players. So, and it just went from there. But what I remember about this is, I'm writing about this. For me, this series is about anger and personal. It's a very personal rivalry, but my goodness, you go back and it overshadowed the games. Games were incredible players, overtime games, last-second field goals, just incredible swings of momentum and emotions. And 3 or 4 times they were both in the top 5. Imagine that. We give Oklahoma and Nebraska credit for being one of the all-time series. Colorado, Nebraska was nothing to laugh at. It was top 10 every year. Both in the top 10, both top 5. Who was going to win and play go to the Orange Bowl? Who was going to lose and go somewhere else? That's what it became, and then it just kept going. I just think of '94, Brooke Behringer, Eric Alford throwing the tight end. Bill McCartney during the week. I'm not sure that this kid is good enough to play on a stage, and Brooke Behringer proved him wrong. The next year going to Boulder, '95, no penalties. Tommy Frazier's favorite play wasn't the Florida run in the Fiesta Bowl. He hates that play. It was the he was getting sacked, and he completed a third down pass to Amon Green. That was a key early in the game. He loves that play. '96 in the rain, Grant Wistrom and Jason Peters sacking Detmer. 98, 90, I don't remember 98. 99, they should have lost. They tried to lose. They still won out there. It was an overtime game. And 2001, of course, 2000 was Josh Brown's field goal in Lincoln. Again, last second Incredible stuff. 2001, the game where everything turned. Well, not really. Colorado people always think, well, that killed Nebraska's program. You know, we took out their heart and soul, and you know, Nebraska still won 6 out of the next 9 games against Colorado. So they still won the division in the Big 12 a few times. They didn't quite go away, but it made for a good conversation between the two things. So, Evan, I could go on forever, but the thing that strikes me about this series is we don't look at the games, the players. We look at the way it made us feel. And people, I think this is the last one, maybe ever, in the regular season. Nebraska is, and we talk about what this means to the two fan bases and the schools, but they've only played 3 times since they both left the Big 12 in 2010. They played 18, 19, and then last year, so this will be 4th. Nebraska's schedules are booked through 2034. Okay, we got Cincinnati next year. They got Cincinnati twice, Tennessee twice, Arizona, Oklahoma State. So it's booked through 2034. I don't see Colorado on there anywhere. I mean, I guess Trev Alberts or Bill Moose made those schedules. They didn't feel like it was important enough to put Colorado on there. Meanwhile, Colorado's schedules are booked through 2031. They apparently didn't feel like it was necessary to have Nebraska on there. So, does anybody really care about this anymore? I just wonder, will they ever play it again? 2036, we may be one 40-team division, or the Big Ten and SEC may decide we're just going to play each other in our conference, just have one game a year, and just go with that. It'll help us make the playoff. Who knows what college football will be like in 2036? I hope I'm still here watching it, but I hope we're all still here. I don't expect Nebraska to Colorado to go on. I just don't. I don't think it means as much as it used to.
I'll just add, for what it's worth, the Restore the Order game in 2005. That was when I was in college.
Oh, yeah.
I went to that game,
Yeah.
30-3. That was, huge. Seeing a whole section of Colorado get kicked out, ejected from that game. And then anyone, under the age of 40 can tell you about where they were when Alex Henry hit the field goal, or when
Yes.
Ndamukong Suh put a knee to Cody Hawkins' helmet and ran into the end zone. Like, that's the stuff. Like, I think in the 21st century, those 2 moments are still, they've got to be top 5.
Well,
like, for Nebraska,
I
euphoric
totally agree.
moments, I think.
I'll tell you how much this series means. I haven't been here forever. It just seems like it. But I felt the stadium move a handful of times. Literally shake. 2 of those times were against Colorado. 92, Calvin Jones scores, takes off the helmet. One of the iconic images of Nebraska football history. Just because you can see the emotion of the moment on Calvin. And just if you watch that video, you can feel everything shaking. And then Ndamukong Suh's the pick 6 again. Maybe it was just the big man stomping all over Colorado as he ran to the end zone, but the thing is shaking. It's just the emotion. Colorado brought that out of Nebraska. Nebraska should probably be thankful in a way, because they had to up their game. They brought out the best in Nebraska, and which I'm not sure Bill McCartney, that wasn't the intention. The intention was to make Colorado better, not make Nebraska better than they already were, but he did it. So, yeah. And will we feel something again Saturday night?
Maybe so.
It's possible, for sure.
You go to some picks?
Yeah, let's do it. Last week, Evan, you were 9-2.
Okay. All right.
I was 8-3, and Tom was 7-4. He was the only one to get the Nebraska line right, though.
Right.
Kudos to him. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
Cyhawk, Iowa State, Iowa, in Kinnick.
Iowa.
I've fallen for this so many times going with Iowa State. I got to go Iowa.
Iowa for Evan, Iowa for me. Michigan State at Maryland. I'm going to go Maryland.
Yeah, I'll go Turtles.
Same. Sparty was not impressive week 1.
California Auburn. At Auburn. Cal Auburn.
I think Auburn's could be pretty good. Auburn.
Same.
Auburn for Evan.
That's a weird game.
Auburn for me, it is. KU Illinois. KU is a 2-point favorite in Memorial Stadium in Champaign.
Well, don't tell my daughter this, but I'm going to take ILL. And I think KU's really, really good.
I think Kansas pulls it out.
KU for Evan and KU for me. Tennessee at North Carolina State. I'm going to take the Vols.
Same.
Yeah, Tennessee.
All going with the road team, I see. Boise at Oregon. Big line here. Are we all taking Oregon?
I think Oregon's going to have something to prove this week.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'll be curious to see if Oregon's defense shows up a little bit better. Idaho actually moved the ball quite a bit on. Game for the AFC North. I'm kidding. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati, collegiate version.
I'll go Cincy.
I'll take
WKRP.
Take the home team. Yep.
I'm going to go Pitt. There was no commensurate sitcom with Pittsburgh, was there?
Skyline over Iron City Light.
Yeah. Here's an interesting one. Mississippi State and perhaps the most impressive team of week 1, Arizona State. I'll take Arizona State. Mississippi State won this game last year.
I'm going to do the same. ASU.
Where's the game?
It is in Tempe.
Yeah, I'll go Tempe.
I mean, ASU was good last week. Wyoming is not that bad. I mean, the line was like 8, and ASU won by 40. It was impressive. Kansas State at Tulane.
Oh, God, I covered that game in 1988.
I'm taking Tulane.
Crazy memory. Are you?
Yeah, I am.
I'll go K-State.
Yep, Team Emaw.
What?
Every man a Wildcat.
Oh, yeah.
Kansas State.
Tulane won this game 2 years ago.
Right.
The Brain Bowl, Duke Northwestern.
Yeah.
I'm going Duke.
I'll say Northwestern.
Northwestern for Tom. I shall go Duke.
Can we just say and lament that we don't get to cover a game in Northwestern this year with their makeshift field on the lake? How cool would that have been?
It'd be cool.
Yeah.
It would be cool. I've actually been on the spot. When I did that Lost in the Big Ten tour, they took me right to the spot where that stadium is now. It's literally 30 feet from the lake. I'm a little concerned that they wouldn't have enough room for the Nebraska media. I don't think we would have been there. I think they would have moved us to Wrigley. So there's your real.
Hey, that'd have been all right.
Yeah,
Either way,
what's wrong with that?
Would have covered a game in Wrigley.
That's a win-win.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think they would have had enough room.
What about
It's
Soldier
tiny.
Field?
That would have been great too.
There you go. Bears fan?
That would have been awesome. I think Wrigley would have been of the three would have been the best.
That'd be
But
sweet.
like they don't have many media there. They're having all their games that nobody in the media doesn't cover. Like Duke doesn't bring anybody up. All right, this one's pretty easy in my opinion. Texas, Michigan.
Yeah, Texas.
They looked really good. Yeah, Texas.
Here's a question for you. Do you think if you polled Nebraska fans, and I'm going to do it, that more would root for Texas than Michigan? I think they might.
I don't know about that.
I don't think they feel that strong about Michigan. Not like they do Texas. I think there's a stronger feeling for Nebraska about Texas than Michigan.
I think
I
think
agree.
you're probably right.
Might be close.
It would be interesting. Last one, Colorado, Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Got a score. High score and low score.
High score.
Kind of with you. Evan?
Yeah, I think Nebraska finds a way somewhere in the 35 to 28 type of range. I think Nebraska finds a way.
Nebraska, 31. Colorado, 27. Screws break the losing streak. There's our picks for this week. Well, there's a little bit of variety. A little bit. Probably not quite as much. We'll have more in the following weeks when the games get a little bit more interesting.
We will. And we'll be back next week with another Pick 6. Man, we're going to be talking about Nebraska, Colorado, the UNI game. I know everyone's excited for that. Coming up
Troy
after
Dannon
that.
Bowl.
But doggone it, like these are the games that we get up for. These are the ones that make memories. These are the ones people will set aside time and money. So hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed listening. For Sam and Tom, I'm Evan. This is the Pick Six Podcast.